Welcome to ContenderCast, a global leadership and consumer industries entrepreneurship podcast centered on shining a light on bright ideas. And now, here's your host, Justin Hahnemann.
Thanks for listening, thanks for tuning in, thanks for downloading. It's Justin Hahnemann on the ContenderCast. We're shining a light on bright ideas. Today, we're in the food space, and you guys are going to love this brand called The Good Fats. And on the podcast today is Suzie Yorke, their founder and CEO. Suzie, it's so great to have you on the podcast.
Hi, Justin. Well, I'm very excited to be here today, so thanks for having me on.
I'm so excited that you're here, too. I loved learning about you, and your products are amazing. I can't wait to dive in. They make me hungry looking at them, and my guess is you're going to tell me something about them that I'm like, oh my God, I wouldn't normally like that, but I have a feeling I'm really going to like it. So I'm so excited to unpack that today with you. For those who don't know Suzie, her background is strongly in the consumer product space. She spent time at Procter & Gamble, at Frito-Lay, at Heinz, ConAgra. I mean, the biggest brands out there, and has great experience, and especially in the marketing space. I saw that was your real focus. But Suzie, talk about your background and how you got to this place where you decided to start your own business.
For sure, Justin. I think my background certainly has a big role to play in being successful with my first startup at age 50. You often hear that it's, your 10th or 5th or 10th startup that really takes off. And I was, first one age 50, and it's gone really well. We just exceeded 100 million in cumulative sales. So,
unbelievable. Yeah,
more than I could have ever expected. But my background played a key role. I'm a little bit of a unique duck out there. I'm French Canadian, so I kind of grew up with the French culture, not speaking too much English, went to McGill in engineering, electrical engineering. So I kind of was pretty good with numbers, but I really wanted to be in business. So I had the opportunity to interview at Procter & Gamble, and they took me into a test a bit. The first kind of non-business grad took me into their marketing program in Toronto. So I made the big move. And then I really had the 12 years in a very disciplined tier one approach to building brands. And I'm speaking a lot to new entrepreneurs now in podcasts. I'm doing a lot of university presentations. And I'm saying, like the stuff you're learning in class, like it's real.
It is
Positioning,
real.
Product, price, value, awareness, and trial. Like that's the foundational stuff. And I happen to have, 25 years of the foundational stuff on kind of other people's money,
Right,
it wasn't
totally.
my own.
It's like they were training you.
Yeah, it wasn't my kids' university funding that was at risk. So for sure, my background the last 10 years was more so in weight loss. So Weight Watchers, I was their head of marketing.
Saw that.
And then dietary supplement, which was a brand that was the number 2 brand in food and drug and mass in the U.S. So that really gave me some good background as to how to build a brand that's in the pharmacy section at Walmart U.S. because that's a tough beast in itself. So I kind of had a bunch of experiences that kind of were the building blocks to what our brand is right now. We're in food, drug, mass in the U.S. We're in the pharmacy set in Walmart. We have an e-com business, which I was very deeply immersed in at Weight Watchers and getting that from the ground up in Canada. So all building blocks that led to a big, risky leap at age 50.
Right. So I have to ask, and we both know many colleagues in the CPG industry at those big companies, and most of them, once they've been there for a certain period of time, they don't leave. Or if they do leave, they go to another like brand, right? And here you are starting your own business. So how did you decide to make the leap? And I mean, wow, what a successful leap. But at the time, did you know this was going to be your space to dial into? Like, what did that look like?
No, I didn't. Like, times were different, right? I'm 54 now. And
all of 4 years.
Yeah. So when I graduated, I remember interviewing, and I was like, and I wasn't sure I wanted to take the job at Procter & Gamble because I had all these engineering jobs. I had one in Santa Clara, and I had these like large, very successful technical companies that wanted to hire me, and I had a bursary for another company, and P&G said, what do you want to do and down like long term in your career? I said, well, one day I want to start my own company. So that sealed it. So I remember saying that, and they said, well, you have to come here, right? Because you're going to learn how to build a brand.
Totally.
period, full stop. And I also remember at age 15, so maybe 5 or 7 years before that, I told my mom one day I want to be a businesswoman, which I didn't really know what that meant because I didn't go to business school or figure that out.
Right.
But so it was kind of in my DNA and was latent. In my 20s and 30s, you're at big multinationals, you're getting promoted. Like I got promoted pretty quick and you have more and more responsibility. Suddenly I'm managing 100 million, 200 million. In brands and big budgets. And then, I was doing triathlons. I had my first child, and you're kind of trapped, right? Of like,
right.
well,
you have your routine and your schedule. Yeah.
Yeah. And the money, and like I live in Toronto, it's really, really expensive. And I grew up sharing a bedroom with my mom for 13 years. So I didn't have, money as a safety net. I didn't have, kind of anything that if I didn't kind of have a job and a good job, like then I wouldn't, have kind of money to for my kids or whatnot.
Totally.
And then I became a single mom. So the root of entrepreneur wasn't an obvious one in my 20s and 30s. And to be honest, back then, it was way riskier to start a brand. Like today, the world is set up for startups.
I agree. There's a good onboarding path now for beverage and food, right?
And it's getting better and better every day. It wasn't as easy in Canada, but there's definitely some groups and setups, and then more and more government and crown corporation funding set up to help. It's still not easy, but the path is paved. So for 20, 30 years, I would even ask, about entrepreneurship. And I was told like a dozen times, if you're over 30, forget it.
Right.
You can't do it in your key years that you have babies, forget it. So that kind of wipes up another 15 years. Like there was all these like black and white no's because. So, but I knew I was an entrepreneur. Like I'm a bit of the exception. Sure. I'm not the, 25-year at one CPG.
You moved between locations. Yeah, totally.
And I would get excited with the phone call of like, this brand's been declining for 10 years. We need someone to, so I'm like, okay, I'm in. So that's very unique. Not all marketers like to do that, and that there's change and risk with that. So I think it's all a combination of I was an entrepreneur, getting some good learnings, working on some very tough business challenges, working on weight loss for the last 10 years. And then the world opened up to startups, and I had an idea. Boom, all kind of perfect storm.
You had an idea, and that's where we're going next. I love it. So Love Good Fats is a disruptive food startup, a new family of very low sugar keto snacks that are ridiculously delicious, creamy, melt in your mouth bars, loaded with good fats, go on and on. I mean, this is awesome. So, but what we're seeing now is like the product, no pun intended, of a couple years of a lot of hard work. How did you have the initial idea, and what was the initial idea?
Yeah, the initial idea is I was in my mid-20s. I'd been following a low-fat diet for 20 years because I was always trying to lose those last kind of 10 pounds. Sure. And especially when I got into racing too, you want to be leaner and faster.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And then, of course, on a low-fat diet, that's not possible. Like you can't be healthy and lean and fast and hit your mid-40s. I took a job. I was commuting to Vancouver, which is a 5-hour flight, etc. And it all fell apart. I couldn't kind of stay. I needed to get on high blood pressure medication, so that was very disappointing. I wasn't able to kind of just delay that. I had to get on medication for my tummy, my GI, like IBS. So, I was like, oh my goodness gracious, right? Like I was doing yoga daily, didn't matter. And then I read a book, The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz. And she spent 9 years researching and basically said, for 40 years, we've been misinformed. So that day I was on the plane on my way to Expo West, which where a lot of startup ideas are.
Totally.
And I was doing consulting and I got off the plane. I'm like, whoa, like some other marketer in North America is going to see what I'm seeing. Like there's a need for a brand to be the beacon, like the message with a mission of it's okay to eat good fats, and the culprit is sugar, which is kind of fat is back and sugar's out. And then so the first year, so then I was like, okay, like I'm walking the show, I'm going back to my hotel, I'm Googling names with the USPTO trademark office.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, no one kind of had thought about it. There was lots more fats at the show, but there was no kind of big, fats brand yet. And And then, so then it kind of started a PowerPoint, you know, and I did what I know how to do, concepts.
Right.
You write your brand idea on a white sheet of paper and you put it in front of consumers, like concept testing 101. And I did like 4 or 5 rounds. I refined the messaging. At one point, I had guilt in the messaging, so that didn't work, obviously. But
got it.
refine the concept, and then I was getting stronger and stronger scores. In parallel, I'm working on a product brief. In parallel, I'm working on a packaging brief.
Which you had done before, right? I mean, these are things you had done elsewhere.
Yeah, you kind of start with the basics, you know, your positioning that then allows you your product brief, your marketing brief, your website brief, your packaging brief, your eventually PR brief, e-com, et cetera, et cetera. So I just kind of started like those basics. If you're in a big CPG and you have a new idea, you'll go through the same steps.
Totally.
I was just doing them 10 times faster and spending all my own money.
Your own money, right. But the process moves a little faster.
Yeah.
That's great.
And then really, once I got, like, the idea was pretty simple, because back then in 2016, 17, if you Googled, you know, high-fat desserts, you would find fat bombs. And I was like, whoa, what's that?
What's a fat bomb?
Bombs, right? It was before keto. And it was just it's really kind of what our bars are. Like, they're like a fat bomb, which is they're shelf-stable and healthy, so they can be sold in a store versus you making them in your kitchen and then having to eat them out of the fridge really quickly. So that was the product brief. And then I worked with a lab, and then we started like making amazing samples. And then I eventually took that to a co-packer. The co-packer said, well, you know, we got to change all this because that doesn't work on our big machines.
It doesn't work in the machine, right?
But, you know, a lot of kind of trials and tribulations to get the product made, because that back then there's no co-packer in North America really that had done like fat bars. They were all doing protein bars, and everyone was on the phone saying, we can do a protein bar that doesn't go hard, like we know. And I was like, well, no, right. I want a fat bar that doesn't melt.
Right.
So very, very different. Yeah.
Now, so did you already have the network figured out in order to at least get those initial products developed? Or did you have to do research to figure out, like, who can I work with to actually develop a bar?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or did you lean on your network? What did that look like?
I had a little bit of a network. Like, I had been, you know, an executive and kind of single mom commuting the crazy long 10-hour days and the lunches and carpool and all that. So I always was beating myself up that I hadn't done a really good job in networking. I probably had 300 contacts on LinkedIn. So it wasn't really, you know, I was doing once every 3 years and quote networking lunch to try to stay connected. So I hadn't really prioritize that, which I now tell everybody not to do what I did. I did not have a network for the R&D and the co-man, but I was working my network enough in terms of, is this a good idea? And went back to my first bosses and a bunch of companies and VPs that I knew. And that network allowed me to eventually find a co-packer and get a door open, and eventually raise the first round of seed money to just start the machines. Got it. And so it was a big algorithm. When you think about it, I started at LinkedIn kind of saying, hey, I'm looking for a little R&D kitchen. And then, you know, I got like 10 different options and I worked that. And then I'm looking for packaging, and then I worked that. So LinkedIn and networking became this algorithm of getting the right people. I got a board. As soon as you want to raise money, you need a board. Totally. So, okay, well, you know, phone calls. I need to find a law firm. Okay, you know, go to my network. Right. So it was really small at first. It was 2 people, 5 people. By the end of about a year and a half, I presented my little pitch and my PowerPoint under my arm to 200 people. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And what were the responses? I mean, what did it look like from those 200 people? All but one said, this is fantastic. Wow. Okay. And so everyone loved it. And yeah, like everyone was like, this is a big idea. And back then I was really just naively, I don't think I really believed in myself all that much. And I was really just looking for reassurance, right? And my last question would be like, would you kind of, if you were me, would you take your kids' university funds to and put it into this? You know, because everybody can sit there and say, hey, you have a good idea, go do it. And I'll cheer you on the sidelines, right? Not their money involved. Yeah. And then, but what I was kind of getting, and I really kind of wanted to get, I respected all these people that I met like a lot and valued their input. And, anyone who knows me know I'm much more collaborative of like, okay, let me know what you think. I'm not going to listen to all the advice, but I'm certainly going to take all the advice in and put it into my little kind of funnel here. And when you have 200 people you respect say, whoa, you're onto something. And then they gave me feedback about this, about that. They introduced me. So now I have 10,000 contacts on LinkedIn. And, it's all like I'm trying to give back as much, but it literally starts with, 2 phone calls, 2 emails.
I love it.
It just starts that way.
And so when did you know it was like, so you got feedback from 200 plus people saying, hey, I love the idea on PowerPoint. When did you know you have a product that people like? In other words, was there a point when you're like, okay, I think this has legs now. People are going to buy this. You know what I mean? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah. And the 200 was over like a longer period.
Right.
So it evolved from like a PowerPoint with a couple of pages to like a much more sophisticated kind of pitch deck, I would say.
Sure.
But as soon as we started getting the samples, like it really started, like once I was at the R&D lab, I was going down every week at this little kitchen and I got round 1 and then round 2 and none of them were commercializable, but it's like, oh my, they thought they would be, but they weren't.
Got it.
And I was like, oh my goodness gracious, this is insanely delicious.
Yeah. Wow. And even though it's your own product, you were like, you liked it.
I was blown away. Like the first ever sample, I remember I was just sitting there, my mouth was open. I was like, these are insane. Like, really? We can make this in a plant? And, we had to make a few tweaks to that kind of homemade version.
Sure.
But yeah.
Wow.
And that's when we knew. So then by then I was kind of pulling some folks together and, you work a bunch of things in parallel. You should work your distributor network and your co-man network, your listings network. So I went to Whole Foods and went to UNFI and in Canada Purity Life and all those 3 right away said, yep, you're onto something.
Perfect,
they tasted the little foil samples and they're like, oh my God, like this is amazing. Insane. Yeah. Now we had a lot of work to do after that because the bars weren't, they were melting initially like a lot. So I remember I was in a meeting at Starbucks and between the beginning and the end of the meeting, the bar went from like, no. So we had to do a lot of work. Like we have 200 iterations of the formulations and product. I work with 2 PhDs. I got some kind of quote secret ingredients and percentages that are really, really key.
That make it work.
So it was not easy, but that was kind of the path.
What were the initial flavors, or what was the initial flavor? And was it, because I see lemon mousse here, peanut butter chocolatey, chocolate chip cookie dough, yum. Was there one that was the initial one, or was it, hey, we're going to go out with a couple flavors?
Well, for sure, peanut butter chocolately is a staple. So if you work in bars, that, chocolate, peanut butter chocolate. So that was the first. And then chocolate chip coconut was the first 2.
Wow.
But within 6 weeks, we got feedback from one of the largest Whole Foods downtown Toronto saying, you're outselling every other bar we have on the shelf.
We need more.
And so I came back and there was just me, employee of one, and I had my little quote board / advisors. And I was like, whoa, email everybody.
Right.
Like, okay, we need 2 more flavors. ASAP. So we got 2 more flavors in 8 weeks.
Wow.
And had to raise a little bit more money to turn the machines on again. So then we had 4 bars, and that's kind of critical mass in bars, right?
Cookies and cream.
2 is suicidal, 4 is perfect.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I like the variety packs. So okay, got it. So how did you get into retail? Versus only selling direct to consumer? A lot of food startups, as you know, like they immediately pop up their Shopify site or other direct to consumer site because they can do that quickly. How did you initiate some of the retail relationships? Yeah,
we did the same thing. Shopify was whatever it was, $11 a month.
Right.
I, paid for the subscription, bought the GoDaddy site, like all the stuff you startups founders do. And the site was up like 7 months before we were on the shelf because we had a bit of false starts with the recipes. But, no one's really going to buy unless you start spending on your Shopify site.
Got it.
And we weren't ready. We didn't have enough volume anyway. But it was always, like with my background, it was always a retail play. Like the consulting
Got it. So that was your focus. Even though you have the website, it was like more marketing for the product.
like we knew, like I had enough, on my board. I had an expert in bars, and he had worked at the largest kind of broker in Canada, and so we knew
helpful.
Like, yeah, the strat plan was always a retail play, but we always kind of said, hey, how can we get because we knew that some bars had really like 20-30% in e-com, even back 4 years ago. We're like, whoa, like we'd want to do that, but that wasn't kind of our area of expertise, but that was like also going to be a play.
Got it.
But retail first.
That's fascinating. And then did you have a challenge of like meeting demand of retail? In other words, it's one thing to get into retailer. It's another to like you said you're outselling the other bars without any marketing. It sounds like. I mean, were you able to manage to do that, or what did that look like?
Supply was pretty crazy. We went from $5,000 POs to then we had a couple of months at 40,000, 100,000,
8 times.
Then we had $1 million. On month 12.
Gosh.
Yeah, we had $1 million month at month 12.
Wow.
And then we had some months at 7 million. Really.
That's amazing.
So demand was pretty challenging, but we had a co-packer that has a lot of capacity. So it was just working with them to scale. It was still kind of jumping through hoops because we needed a second line and a third line and all that, but it all kind of worked out. And then COVID kind of slowed down the demand. So, we kind of allowed to get into kind of steady state, and then you can kind of spend a bit more time on optimizing versus just chasing big POs.
Got it. Yeah. And okay. So, and with your marketing background, one thing we haven't talked about is how'd you engage the consumer? How'd you get the message out? Obviously you did a lot of work on packaging. It's amazing, which should be part of like the marketing person's eye. What about other types of marketing?
Well, packaging is definitely your, first place, and it comes back to positioning,
and
which
colors.
is really your packaging,
awesome.
product, and price value and awareness trial. So awareness trial at first was just all the basics. I was in every single Whole Foods, multiple times a week, every weekend doing the demos. We were at the trade show, so the Canadian trade show is CHFA, and sampling as much as we could. We did some scrappy kind of, basically bootstrapping moves. We had some early keto group adopters. So I was talking to everybody. I was definitely the founder that interacted. Like it's still to this day, I answer all my LinkedIn's myself.
That's awesome. I love that.
Like very, very authentic. So I stood at more consumer shows in the fall and then the spring, demos myself. I wanted to do, we were hiring a demo company. I'm like, I'm still going, right?
Right. You're the founder. You're the vision carrier. Do you know what I mean?
Well, plus, we had innovation down the pipe, right? And we had feedback, like I wanted, you kind of have to know and be connected. So basically the grassroots demos, a little bit of Shopify, social, and shows.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. You shared a little bit about where you are today. This is 5 years, 4 months into this now. What's ahead, especially coming out of COVID? Like what's top of mind as you're looking at this year?
Yeah, we definitely want to have a very fast start coming out of COVID. So we're very grateful. We did a really big raise before, like as COVID was starting. So we wanted to make sure we protected our employees, protected the brand, protected cash flow. So that gave us a lot of runway, which we still have today. We're competing. We're in the big leagues. We're in the U.S. We're with the big boys, I like to say.
Right.
I guess there's a few girl brand twos, but, we're in the big leagues. So we want to kind of have a fast start. We know our marketing mix works really well. We have our awareness top of funnel messaging works really well to engage. So we work very closely with each of our accounts to have customer marketing program tailored in their accounts. Plus, we didn't cut trade spend, which a lot of companies pull back on.
Totally.
And, we're kind of gearing for a pretty fast start with ads and displays. And then as soon as the world reopens up, we'll open up the marketing in a much bigger way also.
That's awesome. Yeah, things are moving. I mean, I'm excited. You can already see some of the wheels moving in retail and CPG. One thing I love to ask all of my guests is, you went from working for a big brand to starting your own business, very successful, excited. You've got just some good trajectory and you've learned a lot. What would be 2 or 3 of the biggest lessons learned you'd share with our listeners in terms of, thinking about their startup, they're starting a brand, they're launching a new product, or other?
Yep. So lesson number 1 is definitely start. And that's advice
right.
that's given,
even at
just
age
start.
50.
Yeah. Just
right.
start, go from I have an idea to like, okay, where's the product? Where's the packaging? Like move it, like get it into 10 stores. So number 1 is start. And I think that's the hardest move for a lot. Number 2 is just do your homework on spend the most of your time up front on the positioning and the product, because after that it's execution. And a lot of people can help you do execution, and execution you can just keep dialing up. It's harder to back up and retrofit, if your positioning is not quite there, therefore your packaging, therefore all your brand, therefore your company, your culture is all connected back. Start with the positioning and get consumer input, work with the right experts that help you on optimizing your positioning. Don't stop there. Same with product. If you have those 2, that's kind of gives you the potential. And then number 3 is, you're gonna wind up having a lot of trip ups, and just get up and go at it again. Get up, go at it again. Be humble and open to feedback and learnings. You're gonna make sense of everything. Just be humble to listen to what the world is telling you out there. Don't discount it, and then just get back up and then pivot if you need to, but don't give up.
I love that. Yeah, and there is this like healthy tension of just start and pursue it, and at the same time spend a little bit of time on the vision and the kind of what you want the brand to be about and the product to be about. And then you're right, there's a lot of resources for execution in the space. I think that's great advice. Share, I love this. This is so exciting, and I can't wait to stay connected with you and have you back on as you continue to grow. But share with our listeners where they can find you, connect with you, buy your product, etc.
Yeah, so lovegoodfats.com is the easiest place. We're also on Amazon, Canada, US. We do big business there. But Love Good Fats, you can find us on Instagram, Love Good Fats. You can find us on Facebook.
You got it all.
But just go
Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
Yeah.
That's
go
great.
to the website and LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me, certainly LinkedIn and DM me. I'm quite behind when some big news breaks. I literally get 200 DMs, so just bear with me.
Wow.
But I'm there, and I'm real, and I'd love to chat.
Well, Suzie, thanks so much for carving out time to do the podcast today. Again, look forward to staying in touch. Excited for you and your brand, and look forward to having you back on.
Perfect. Thanks, Justin. It's been a pleasure.
The ContenderCast is sponsored by Henderson Shapiro Peck and powered by Contender Brands. You can download additional ContenderCast episodes directly via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeartMedia, YouTube, and other preferred podcast platforms. If you would like to be a guest on the ContenderCast, connect with us at contendercast.com. This is Brian Benson reminding you that every winner started as a contender.